This story is fictional. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. I went through being treated like an ATM, only contacted to pay bills. But on the stage of a Thanksgiving dinner with 30 relatives, they finally learned I was the one holding the keys, and I had printed family group chat messages to prove it. It sounds dramatic when I say it like that, like something from a courtroom drama or one of those viral family meltdown videos. But that's exactly how it happened. My name is Nolan Pierce. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a college admissions counselor at a private university in North Carolina. I spend most of my days guiding nervous high school seniors through applications, helping them frame their stories in ways that show growth, integrity, and resilience. I tell families that transparency matters, that fairness matters. It's funny how easy it is to give advice you don't follow in your own life. My younger sister, Lily Pierce, has always been the golden child. She's 26 now, technically an adult, but in our family, she's still treated like something delicate and irreplaceable, like a porcelain figurine that everyone else has to tiptoe around. And then there's me, the responsible one, the stable one, the one who doesn't need help. My father, Harold Pierce, likes to describe me as independent. He says it with pride in public. But what it really means is that no one checks on me unless something is due. Growing up, it was subtle. If Lily forgot to study for a test, she was overwhelmed. If I forgot, I wasn't living up to my potential. If she dented the car, it was an accident. If I scraped a mailbox backing out at 16, I got a lecture about responsibility that lasted 3 days. Still, I told myself that was just how families were. Different kids, different expectations. The money started small. Can you spot Lily $300 for books? Financial aid's delayed. Your dad's short on the mortgage this month. Just temporary. Temporary turned into routine. Routine turned into expectation. The first time it really hit me was after I'd worked a 14-hour college recruitment event in Atlanta. I was sunburned, hoarse, and dead tired when I got Harold's voicemail. Nolan, we need a $150 by Friday. Lily messed up the rent transfer. Don't make this into a whole thing. Don't make this into a whole thing. Like my hesitation would be the problem. I sent the money. Then I opened our family group chat, ironically named Pierce Pride. Lily had written, I feel bad asking Nolan again. He always acts weird about it. My dad responded, he's fine. He wouldn't have gotten where he is without this family. He owes us. Owes us. I read that message 3 times. I'd paid for Lily's car insurance twice that year, covered an emergency room copay, quietly sent grocery money when she forgot to budget. But somehow, in their version of reality, I was ungrateful. That night, I started taking screenshots, not because I had a plan. I wasn't plotting revenge. I just wanted proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that the narrative they told about me didn't match the facts. I saved everything after that. Requests, comments, jokes at my expense, because deep down, I knew one day I'd need receipts. What I didn't know was that someone else had been watching too. And by the time Thanksgiving rolled around, with 30 relatives packed into my aunt's dining room, there would be more than just my screenshots on the table. There would be a letter, handwritten, and it wouldn't be from me. I just had no idea it even existed, until the moment my grandmother stood up, tapped her glass, and said, "Before we eat, there's something you all need to hear." Thanksgiving at my Aunt Marlene's house is less a dinner and more a production. 30 people crammed into a split-level suburban home that was built to comfortably hold maybe 12. Folding tables line the living room. Kids are banished to the basement with paper plates. The TV is permanently tuned to football no one's actually watching. It smells like roasted turkey, sweet potatoes, and the faint burn of something that's been left in the oven 5 minutes too long. This year felt heavier the second I walked in. I hadn't sent money in 2 months. That might not sound dramatic, but in my family, that was a statement. The requests had come, of course. They always did. Lily's transmission went out. Insurance raised our premium again, just until next paycheck. Instead of wiring money immediately, I'd started responding with questions. What's the plan for repayment? Can you send the bill? Have you looked into assistance programs? The tone shifted fast. You've changed. Since when are you so cold? I didn't argue. I just stopped replying as quickly. I moved all communication to email. If they texted, I'd say, can you send that to my email? calm, professional. The same tone I used with families appealing financial aid decisions. At work, I'm trained to separate emotion from documentation. At home, I was finally trying the same strategy. When I stepped into Aunt Marlene's foyer that afternoon, Lily was already there, perched on the arm of the couch like she owned the room. She looked good, new boots, fresh highlights, manicured nails, not exactly the picture of someone constantly in financial crisis. "Nolan," she called out brightly. "You made it." I hugged her. She smelled like vanilla perfume and expensive shampoo. "You doing okay?" I asked. She gave me a look that was half smile, half accusation. "I mean, it's been stressful. Of course it had." Harold appeared from the kitchen carrying a tray of deviled eggs like he was hosting a political fundraiser. He clapped me on the shoulder, hard enough to sting. "There's my big success story," he announced to no one in particular. It was the public version of him, loud, proud, generous with praise when there was an audience. "Hey, Dad," I said evenly. "Still busy counting other people's money over there at that fancy school?" he joked. I smiled thinly. "Something like that." Dinner took its usual chaotic path. Plates clattered. Someone's toddler knocked over cranberry sauce. Uncle Ray started debating gas prices before anyone had taken a bite. I kept catching Lily watching me, not warmly, assessing. Halfway through the meal, my phone buzzed. I glanced down under the table, a text from Lily. "Can we talk later? Like privately?" I didn't respond. Across the table, she gave me a tight smile. That was the first sign. The second was when my grandmother, Grandma Evelyn, quietly pushed back her chair. Now, you need to understand something about her. She's not dramatic. She doesn't yell. She's the steady, soft-spoken anchor of the family, the one who remembers birthdays and writes thank you cards in actual cursive. So when she tapped her water glass with a spoon and said, "Before we finish dessert, I need everyone's attention," the entire room went still. Harold frowned slightly. "Ma, can it wait?" "No," she said gently. "It cannot." My stomach tightened. She reached into the cabinet behind her, the one where she keeps her important papers. Out came a large manila envelope. It wasn't sealed. It wasn't thin. "I was asked to share something at the right time," she said, her voice steady. "And I believe this is it." Lily shifted beside me. I could feel it. Harold's jaw clenched. "What's this about?" he asked. Grandma Evelyn looked at me for just a second. Not long enough for anyone else to notice, but I noticed. And in that split second, I realized two things at once. She knew. And whatever was in that envelope wasn't just from me. She pulled out a stack of printed pages, and on the very top, in bold black ink, I recognized the familiar layout of screenshots. Family group chat messages. My heart started pounding, because I hadn't given her those, which meant someone else had been collecting receipts too, and I had a feeling I was about to find out exactly who. Grandma Evelyn adjusted her glasses like she was about to read scripture. You could hear forks settling onto plates. Even the kids downstairs must have sensed something had shifted, because the house felt unusually still. Harold tried to laugh it off. "Ma, this isn't the time for paperwork." "It is precisely the time," she replied, her voice calm but immovable, before stories continue to grow in the wrong direction. That word, stories, hung in the air. Lily crossed her arms. "Grandma, what is this about?" Grandma didn't answer her directly. Instead, she looked around the room at all 30 of us, cousins, aunts, uncles, in-laws, people who'd known me my entire life, but only through the lens my father and sister had provided. "As many of you know," she began, "there have been misunderstandings about Nolan." My pulse roared in my ears. Harold shifted in his seat. "There are no misunderstandings." Grandma held up a single sheet of paper. On June 14th, she read, "Lily wrote in the family group chat, 'I hate asking Nolan again. He makes me feel like a burden.'" A ripple went through the room. My cousin Brianna's eyebrows shot up. Uncle Ray leaned forward. Grandma continued. Harold replied, "He owes us. He wouldn't have anything without this family." Silence. Thick. Heavy. No football commentary from the TV. No silverware clinking. Harold's face reddened. "That's taken out of context." Grandma lifted another page. July 3rd. "If he really cared, he wouldn't ask so many questions before helping." She lowered the paper and looked up. "Would you like me to continue?" Lily's voice came out sharp. "This is private, Grandma. You can't just read our texts out loud." Grandma's gaze softened but didn't waver. Private implies honesty, not rewriting reality. My chest felt tight. I hadn't planned for this. I had my own folder in my briefcase in the hallway, my own stack of screenshots. I'd brought them, yes, but I'd told myself I probably wouldn't need them. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd been keeping records. I want to clarify something, Grandma said. These were not given to me by Nolan. 30 heads turned toward me. My mouth went dry. They weren't? She shook her head gently. They were sent to me by your grandfather before he passed. The room collectively inhaled. Grandpa Walter had died 8 months ago. Quietly, peacefully. He'd been sharp until the end, always reading, always listening more than he spoke. He asked me to wait, Grandma said, her voice steadied by the tremor at the edges. He said, when the story being told about Nolan no longer matches the truth, that's when you open the envelope. Harold stood up halfway from his chair. This is ridiculous. Dad wouldn't. He would, Grandma cut in softly, because he saw. And that's when something clicked. Grandpa had always asked me questions. Real ones. About work. About my goals. About why I looked tired sometimes but said I was fine. He'd been added to the family group chat late. Lily said it was so he could feel included. I'd assumed he barely looked at it. I was wrong. Grandma reached back into the envelope and pulled out a smaller, folded piece of paper, yellowed at the creases. Handwritten. This is his letter. Lily shook her head quickly. Grandma, please. This is embarrassing. Harold lowered his voice, tight and controlled. We can talk about this privately. There it was. The pivot. Private. Not because they cared about my feelings, but because 30 witnesses were suddenly hearing the version of events that had always been kept behind closed doors. Grandma didn't sit down. She unfolded the letter, and before she could read a single word, Lily leaned toward me and hissed under her breath, "If you let her do this, you're blowing up the whole family." I looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt or obligation or fear of being the difficult one. I just felt tired. Maybe, I said quietly, it needed to be blown up. And then Grandma began to read. Grandma Evelyn held the letter with both hands, the paper trembling just slightly, not from weakness, but from the weight of what it carried. This was written in your grandfather's handwriting, she said softly, dated 3 weeks before he passed. Harold sat back down, but his jaw was tight enough to crack a tooth. Lily stared at the table like if she didn't make eye contact, none of this would stick. Grandma began, open quote, "To my family, if you are hearing this, it means I was right to be concerned. I have watched a story form around Nolan, a quiet one, the kind that grows in kitchens and text messages, not in living rooms. The story says he is distant, ungrateful, calculating. What I have seen is different." My throat tightened. Grandpa had never been a man of dramatic speeches. He fixed things, he listened. He circled words in newspapers and slid them across the table when he wanted to make a point. But this was deliberate. Grandma continued reading, open quote, "I have seen bank transfers that were never acknowledged publicly. I have seen requests framed as emergencies that repeat every month. I have seen praise given loudly at holidays while criticism is whispered elsewhere. I am an old man, but I am not blind." Close quote. A murmur moved through the room. Uncle Ray shifted uncomfortably. Aunt Marlene pressed her napkin to her lips. Harold exhaled sharply. "This is unnecessary." Grandma didn't look up. Open quote, "If this letter is being read, it means the narrative has gone too far. And it means Nolan has likely stayed quiet longer than he should have." Close quote. I swallowed. Stayed quiet longer than he should have. That hit. Because that was the truth. I had stayed quiet. I'd convinced myself it was maturity, professionalism, taking the high road. But silence can look like agreement if you let it stretch too long. Grandma reached the final paragraph. Open quote, "There will come a moment when truth needs witnesses. If that moment arrives at a family table, let it arrive. Justice does not require shouting, it requires receipts." Close quote. The word landed like a gavel. Receipts. Grandma folded the letter slowly. "That is what your grandfather wrote." No one spoke for a long moment. Then Harold stood again. "We are not doing this. This is a family matter." Aunt Marlene blinked at him. "Harold, we are family." Lily's voice came out thin. "Grandma, you don't understand. Nolan always makes things sound worse than they are." I felt 30 pairs of eyes turn back to me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I stood up slowly. "I actually haven't said anything yet," I said calmly. Harold let out a humorless laugh. Oh, so now you're the victim? There it was, the pivot to blame. I walked toward the hallway where I'd left my coat. My briefcase sat just inside the door. Lily's voice followed me. Nolan, don't. I picked up the briefcase anyway. When I returned to the dining room, I set it gently on the table between the mashed potatoes and the green bean casserole. I didn't give Grandma those screenshots, I said evenly, but I have my own. Harold's face went pale. Lily shook her head. This is so dramatic. No, I said quietly, this is documented. I opened the case and pulled out a neatly organized stack of printed pages. Dates highlighted, bank transfers attached, notes in the margins. Years of them. I work in admissions, I continued. When families appeal financial aid decisions, we don't go by emotion. We go by documentation, patterns, timelines. I looked around the room. Over the last 4 years, I've transferred $42,600. Gasps. Lily's mouth fell open. That's not. It is, I said, sliding the summary sheet across the table. Car repairs, rent gaps, insurance, medical copays, direct deposits labeled emergency that repeated every other month. Harold's voice rose. You're keeping score? I'm keeping records, I corrected. And then Lily said the thing she probably thought would win the room back. You act like we forced you. You could have said no. I met her eyes. You're right, I said. And that's when the real shift happened, because I realized I finally was going to, and I hadn't even revealed the part they knew nothing about yet. The part Grandpa had quietly helped me build. The part that meant I wasn't just the ATM anymore. I was the one holding the leverage, and they were about to find out how. The room felt smaller somehow, like the walls had leaned in to listen. Lily's words, "You could have said no," hung in the air like she just solved everything. I nodded slowly. You're right. I could have. Harold threw his hands up. Then what is all this? A performance? You want applause for helping your family? No, I said evenly. I wanted honesty. I slid another page across the table, a printed spreadsheet, clean columns, dates, amounts, notes. At the top, family transfers, personal record. I didn't track this to throw it in your faces, I continued. I tracked it because I started questioning my own memory. Every time I hesitated, I was told I was selfish, that I'd changed, that I owed you. Aunt Marlene cleared her throat softly. $42,000 is a lot. It's actually $47,300, I corrected gently. I updated it last week. Harold stared at the number like it might rearrange itself into something smaller. Lily's voice softened, shifting tactics. Nolan, we didn't realize it added up like that. That's because you never asked. Silence again. I took a breath. This was the part I hadn't planned to say out loud, the part I'd kept separate from everything else. You all think I just sit in an office reading essays, I said. What most of you don't know is that 3 years ago, I finished my master's in higher education finance. Harold frowned. What does that have to do with anything? I didn't post about it, I said. Didn't make a big announcement. I was working full-time and studying at night. Lily blinked. You never told us that. I tried, I said quietly, but most calls turned into bill requests. That one landed, I continued. As part of that program, I started consulting on the side, financial literacy workshops, budget planning for families sending kids to college. Eventually, that turned into contract work. I reached into my briefcase again and pulled out a simple folder. Inside was a one-page document. And with Grandpa's help, I used part of my savings to establish a small education trust last year. 30 relatives leaned forward at once. Harold's eyes narrowed. A what? An education trust, I repeated calmly. It's legally structured, it's funded, and it's not connected to my personal accounts. Lily's face drained of color. Why? Because I wanted to help the right way, I said. Not through panic transfers and guilt, through structure, accountability. I let that sink in. The trust is meant to support continuing education, certifications, tuition, career training for immediate family members. Uncle Ray let out a low whistle. So you were planning to help anyway? Yes, I said. Just not like this. Harold's voice hardened. You set up money and didn't tell us? While we were struggling? I met his stare. I was struggling too. That stopped him. I was struggling with feeling like I only mattered when something was due. I was struggling with watching my name get dragged in group chats while I covered bills. Lily's voice cracked. We weren't dragging you. I picked up one of the printed screenshots and read it plainly. He acts like he's better than us. August 12th. Her cheeks flushed. Another page. If he really loved this family, he wouldn't question helping. September 3rd. Harold stepped closer. Sal, we can talk about this privately. There it was again. Private. Save face. I shook my head slowly. Grandpa said truth needs witnesses. Grandma Evelyn gave the smallest nod. Harold lowered his voice, trying one more angle. Son, you're embarrassing your sister. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Clarity. No, I said. I'm clarifying. The room was dead silent now. I placed both hands on the table. The trust has conditions. Written ones. Transparency about finances. A written budget plan. Agreement to stop public narratives that paint me as selfish for setting limits. Lily stared at me. So we have to apply to you now? You'd have to apply to the trust, I corrected gently. Like everyone else. Harold scoffed. This is unbelievable. No, I said quietly. This is structure. I looked around the table at cousins who'd been quiet, at aunts who suddenly wouldn't meet my eyes. For years, the story's been that I'm distant, ungrateful, cold. Tonight, you have numbers, dates, messages. I took a slow breath. I'm not cutting anyone off, but starting now, all financial conversations happen by email only for the next 90 days. No more late-night pressure calls, no more emergency texts. Lily's mouth opened slightly. And if I see my name misrepresented again, I added, steady and calm, contact ends immediately. Harold's face hardened. You're giving us ultimatums? I'm setting boundaries. The words didn't shake. But I wasn't done yet, because there was still one final piece in that envelope Grandma had brought out, and she hadn't read all of it. She reached slowly back toward the remaining pages. There is one more thing your grandfather included, she said, and the way she said it made my stomach drop. Because whatever it was, even I hadn't seen it yet. Grandma Evelyn didn't rush. She let the silence sit until it felt intentional instead of awkward. Then she reached into the envelope again and pulled out a thinner stack of papers, different from the screenshots, different from the letter. These were typed, formal. My stomach tightened. I wasn't sure whether to include this part tonight, she said gently, but your grandfather was very specific. Harold rubbed his forehead. Ma, please. She ignored him. He asked me to attach this to his letter and to share it only if Nolan was being publicly misrepresented. Publicly. That word landed hard, because that's exactly what had been happening. Quiet jabs at church gatherings, subtle comments at birthdays. Nolan's just busy. Nolan's changed. Success went to his head. Grandma looked directly at Lily. These are excerpts from messages that were not sent to Nolan. Lily froze. I blinked. What? Grandma adjusted her glasses. Your grandfather had access to the extended family thread, the one without Nolan. The air shifted. There was another group chat. I'd suspected it, but no one had ever admitted it outright. I just noticed how conversations sometimes referenced things I'd never seen. Lily's face went completely still. Harold looked like someone had just pulled a rug out from under him. Grandma read. October 2nd. Lily, don't tell Nolan I said this, but if he keeps acting stingy, I'm done pretending he's the good brother. A sharp inhale from across the table. Grandma continued. Harold, let him feel guilty. It works. The room erupted in overlapping whispers. That's out of context, Harold snapped. Grandma didn't stop. November 18th. Lily, he won't say no. He cares too much about how he looks. Each sentence felt like a small detonation. I stood there, strangely calm. Not numb, clear. Years of gaslighting have a funny effect. When the truth finally surfaces, it doesn't shock you. It confirms what you already knew but were told was imaginary. Lily's eyes darted toward me. You weren't supposed to see that. I let out a slow breath. I think that's the point. Harold stepped forward. Okay, enough. This is humiliating. For who? Aunt Marlene asked quietly. That question lingered. Grandma lowered the papers. Your grandfather wrote one final instruction, she said. He underlined it twice, and that she unfolded the letter again and read the last line that hadn't been shared yet. Open quote. If apologies are offered, they must be offered where the damage was done. Close quote. The words hit like a bell. Lily looked at me, eyes glossy now. Nolan, we can talk after dinner. We don't need to do this in front of everyone. Private, again. Harold nodded quickly. Yes, this is family business. I shook my head gently. For years, the narrative about me was shared with everyone else. I said, at barbecues, at church, in chats I wasn't part of. I gestured lightly around the room. So the correction happens here too. You could feel the shift in the audience. It wasn't hostile, it was uncomfortable. Witnessing truth usually is. Lily swallowed. Fine. I'm sorry if... I raised a hand softly. No qualifiers. Her mouth closed. Harold's voice dropped low, almost pleading now. Son, you're making this bigger than it needs to be. No, I said quietly. I'm making it accurate. There was a long pause. Then Lily did something I didn't expect. She stood up. Her voice trembled, but it was audible. I said things about Nolan that weren't fair, she admitted. I told people he was selfish, that he didn't care, that he acted superior. Her eyes flicked toward the stack of papers. He helped me, a lot, and I let that turn into resentment instead of gratitude. The room was completely silent. Harold didn't move. Lily took a breath. I'm sorry, not privately, publicly. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't poetic, but it was real. All eyes shifted to Harold. He looked older in that moment than I'd ever seen him. Finally, he exhaled. I shouldn't have said you owed us, he muttered. Grandma tilted her head. Louder. Harold closed his eyes briefly, then looked up. You didn't owe us, he said, voice tight. I was wrong to say that, and wrong to pressure you. There it was. Not dramatic, not cinematic, but undeniable. Justice through receipts. I felt something unclench in my chest. Not triumph. Not revenge. Relief. But I also knew something they didn't. Boundaries aren't declared once. They're tested. And the real question wasn't whether they could apologize. It was whether they could change. As dessert plates were quietly cleared and conversations restarted in cautious tones, my phone buzzed in my pocket. An email notification from Lily, sent to me and copied to the entire extended family. Subject line, clarification. I hadn't even asked yet. I stepped away into the hallway and opened it, and what I read made me realize this wasn't over, not even close. I stood in Aunt Marlene's hallway under a crooked framed photo of a beach vacation from 2009 and opened Lily's email. Subject, clarification. My name was in the to line. The rest of the extended family was CC'd. She hadn't just apologized verbally, she'd put something in writing. My pulse thudded as I read. Open quote, I want to correct the narrative I've contributed to about Nolan. Over the past several years, he has provided me and Dad with significant financial help, more than I ever acknowledged publicly. I allowed frustration and embarrassment about my own financial instability to turn into resentment toward him. That was unfair. He does not owe us. He helped because he chose to. Going forward, I will not describe him as selfish or distant when he sets boundaries. Lily, close quote. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't groveling, but it was clear, and it was witnessed. I exhaled slowly. Footsteps approached behind me. I turned to see Harold standing at the end of the hallway. For once, he wasn't puffed up. He looked uncertain. You happy? He asked, not sharply, just tired. This wasn't about being happy, I said. He leaned against the wall. Your grandfather always liked you best. I blinked. That's not true. He saw himself in you, Harold muttered. The quiet type, always thinking. That explained more than he probably realized. I didn't do this to embarrass you. I said, I did it because I was disappearing. He frowned. I was becoming the version of me that only existed when someone needed money. That's not a relationship. He didn't argue. After a moment, he asked, This trust, is that real? Yes. How much is in it? That's not the point. His jaw tightened slightly at that answer, but he didn't push. I meant what I said, I continued. 90 days of email-only communication for anything financial. No side chats, no pressure calls, and if the narrative shifts back to Nolan is selfish, the moment I say no, I step away. You'd really cut us off? He asked. If it keeps happening, yes. It wasn't said with anger, just clarity. He studied me like he was seeing me at my actual age for the first time. When did you get so firm? He asked, when I realized being agreeable was costing me peace. Back in the dining room, conversations had restarted in low, cautious tones. A few cousins avoided eye contact. Others gave me small nods, subtle acknowledgments. Grandma Evelyn caught my eye from across the room and gave me the faintest smile. Later that evening, as people began gathering coats and leftovers, Uncle Ray clapped me on the shoulder. Didn't know you had that kind of backbone, he said. I always did, I replied, just didn't use it. By the time I stepped outside into the cold November air, the sky was clear and sharp with stars. I sat in my car for a moment before starting the engine. My phone buzzed again. Another email, this one from Harold. Short, open quote, I don't like how tonight went, but I can't argue with the numbers. I'll respect the email boundary. We'll talk after the holidays. Close quote. Not warm, but compliant. It was a start. I drove home feeling lighter but not naive. Apologies are easy in the heat of exposure. Change is quieter, slower. It shows up weeks later when habits resurface. The next morning, I transferred a modest amount into the education trust. Not for them, for structure, for consistency, for the future version of this family that might actually function with transparency. I also did something else. I changed the password on my personal accounts, not because I thought they'd access them, but because symbolism matters. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an ATM. I felt like a person. 3 days later, the first test came. An email from Lily. Subject, car repair estimate, application. Attached, a scanned mechanics quote, a drafted monthly budget, a short paragraph explaining what went wrong and what she planned to change. No guilt, no urgency language, just information. I stared at it for a long time. This was new. Was it genuine, or just compliance because she'd been cornered publicly? I didn't know yet, but I did know one thing. The power dynamic had shifted, not because I'd humiliated anyone, but because truth had been witnessed. And once witnesses exist, narratives don't bend as easily. 2 weeks later, something unexpected arrived in my mailbox. A cream-colored envelope, hand-addressed, no return label. Inside was a single card. Front, a simple embossed turkey. Inside, a short message, open quote, Thanksgiving felt educational. Next year, we'd like you to host. There will be a few conditions. We should discuss them. Close quote, no signature, but I knew who it was from. And just like that, I realized the story wasn't over. It was evolving. And next year, the table would be mine. I left that cream-colored card on my kitchen counter for 2 days before I touched it again. Not because I didn't know who sent it, I did. The handwriting was neat but firm. Controlled. That was Harold. Lily would have added an exclamation point or a heart emoji. Harold preferred ambiguity. It gave him room to maneuver later. Next year, we'd like you to host. There will be a few conditions. Conditions. I almost laughed the first time I reread it. For years, I'd been the one operating under unspoken conditions. Be generous. Be quiet. Don't embarrass the family. Don't say no too loudly. Now they wanted terms. I finally called Grandma Evelyn that Sunday afternoon. She picked up on the second ring. I wondered when you'd call. You knew about the card? I suspected, she said lightly. I leaned back against my couch. Why would they ask me to host? Because control shifted, she replied simply. And when control shifts, people try to rebalance it. That sounded exactly like something Grandpa would have said. Do you think they're angry? I asked. They're uncomfortable, she corrected. There's a difference. I stared at the ceiling. Grandma, did Grandpa really plan all of that? She chuckled softly. Your grandfather didn't plan the confrontation, he planned the protection. Protection. I hadn't thought about it that way. He knew you wouldn't defend yourself loudly, she continued. So he made sure you wouldn't have to defend yourself alone. That one almost broke me. We talked for another half hour about ordinary things. Weather. Her book club. The fact that Aunt Marlene overcooked the rolls again. The normalcy felt intentional. Grounding. When we hung up, I walked back to the counter and picked up the card. If I hosted next year, it wouldn't just be about turkey and folding tables. It would be symbolic. My house, my table, my terms. That night, I drafted an email but didn't send it. Subject, Thanksgiving next year. I typed slowly. Open quote, I'm open to hosting next year. Before agreeing, I'd need clarity on what conditions means. Also, if I host, the gathering will follow the same principles we established this year. Transparent communication. No side narratives. No financial discussions outside agreed channels. Respect for boundaries. If those terms feel restrictive, we can revisit the idea. Nolan, close quote. I stared at it for a long time. Then I saved it to drafts because something else mattered more in that moment. Consistency. Over the next month, I stuck to the 90-day boundary. Every financial question came through email. Lily sent 2 more applications to the trust, both small amounts, both with detailed budgets attached. I approved one, denied the other with an explanation and suggestions for alternatives. She didn't argue. Harold sent exactly one message outside of email, a text about a family friend's retirement party. I didn't respond. 20 minutes later, the same information appeared in my inbox. Compliance, but not warmth. At Christmas, the energy was cautious but civil. No jokes about me being too good for everyone. No subtle digs about money, but also no deep conversations. We were recalibrating. In January, the 90 days ended, and that's when the real test arrived. A message popped up in my inbox from an unfamiliar sender. It was from Aunt Denise, Harold's sister. Subject: I owe you an apology. I opened it. Open quote: I've participated in conversations about you that I shouldn't have. I didn't verify. I didn't ask your side. That's on me. I'm sorry. Close quote. No qualifiers, no excuses. That's when I understood something important. When the receipts were read out loud, they didn't just affect Harold and Lily. They exposed everyone who'd nodded along. Justice through receipts doesn't just clear your name. It forces bystanders to choose whether they'll stay comfortable or become accountable. I finally sent the Thanksgiving reply in February. This time I didn't hesitate. Harold responded 2 days later. Short, measured, open quote. If you host, we request. No reading of private messages, no surprise disclosures, no public confrontations. We want peace. Close quote. I read it twice. Then I replied. Open quote, peace requires honesty. Honesty won't be weaponized, but it also won't be suppressed. If everyone can agree to that, you're welcome at my table. Close quote. He didn't answer for a week. Then, open quote, we'll discuss further, close quote, which in Harold language meant, I'm not used to negotiating with you. Spring rolled in slowly. At work, I coached seniors through acceptance letters and rejections. I told them that clarity, even painful clarity, is better than false hope. I meant it for myself too. By summer, the trust had been used responsibly twice. No emergency texts, no guilt spirals, just process. But I wasn't naive enough to believe the transformation was complete, because patterns don't disappear, they wait. And in late August, just 3 months before the next Thanksgiving, Lily called me. Not emailed, called. I let it go to voicemail. Then my phone buzzed again. Text, please pick up. It's not about money. I stared at the screen. Because sometimes the real turning points don't come with envelopes or letters. Sometimes they come with a single sentence that makes your stomach drop. I called her back, and the first thing she said wasn't what I expected at all. I almost didn't call her back. For a full minute, I just stared at my phone like it might explain itself. It's not about money. That sentence alone told me how far things had shifted. A year ago, I wouldn't have hesitated. I would have answered immediately, bracing myself for whatever number was coming next. Now, I had pause, control. I tapped her name. She picked up on the first ring. Hey, she said, and her voice didn't have that familiar edge of urgency. It sounded nervous. Hey. I replied evenly. You said it's not about money. It's not, she said quickly. Then she hesitated. I mean, not directly. I closed my eyes briefly. Okay. There was a long exhale on her end. I got a job offer, she said. That wasn't what I expected. Okay, I repeated, softer this time. It's in Denver, marketing coordinator for a small outdoor brand. It's entry level, but it's stable. Benefits. Actual structure. I leaned back in my chair. That's great. I'd have to move in October, she continued, before Thanksgiving. And there it was, the shift. You're leaving North Carolina? I asked. Yes. There was something in her voice I hadn't heard in years. Ownership. I didn't want you to hear it from someone else, she added, or think I was running. Are you? I asked gently. She paused. No, she said finally. I think I've just been stuck, and blaming you was easier than admitting that. I didn't respond right away. I've been in the same cycle since college, she continued. Same apartment complex, same panic every month, same story about how it's temporary. That's hard to break, I said. Yeah, it is. Another silence. Then she said something that caught me completely off guard. I don't want to use the trust for this. I blinked. You don't? No. I saved for the deposit, and I picked up extra freelance work. I just wanted you to know I'm not expecting you to fund this transition. That one landed somewhere deep. I appreciate you saying that, I replied. I also, she hesitated. I wanted to ask if I could stay with you for a week before I move, just to save on rent overlap. There it was. Not money, but still support. I considered it carefully. A year ago, I would have said yes automatically and then resented it quietly. Now I evaluated it like I would any request. What week? I asked. First week of October. That's fine, I said after a moment, but we'll treat it like roommates, shared groceries, clear expectations. She laughed softly. You really did become a finance guy. I became someone who likes clarity, I corrected. She went quiet again. Do you still want to host Thanksgiving? She asked carefully. Yes. Even if I'm not there? That caught me. You wouldn't come back? I don't know, she admitted. Flights are expensive, and I don't know if I'm ready to sit at that table again. I thought about that. The public unraveling, the apology, the aftermath. Hosting isn't about proving anything anymore, I said. It's about structure. That sounds like something you'd say in a brochure, she teased lightly. Occupational hazard. She laughed for real this time. Then her voice softened. I meant what I wrote in that email, she said, about correcting the narrative. I know. I'm still working on not defaulting to old patterns, she admitted. It's weird not having you as the emergency contact for everything. That's not a bad thing, I said gently. I know. We stayed on the phone longer than we had in years. Not about money, not about Dad, not about damage control, about Denver, about snow, about whether she'd need real winter boots. When we hung up, I sat there for a while, because this felt different, not fixed, but evolving. 2 weeks later, Harold emailed me, subject Thanksgiving update. Open quote, if Lily moves, attendance will be lower. We may need to reconsider the scale. Also, I think it would be wise to avoid revisiting last year's events. Let's keep things light. Close quote. I read it carefully. Let's keep things light. Translation, let's not lose control again. I replied calmly. Open quote, hosting is still open. The tone will be respectful. No one needs to revisit last year unless they choose to. But honesty won't be edited out. Let me know by October 1st who plans to attend so I can plan accordingly. Close quote. He didn't respond immediately. And for once, that didn't make me anxious. Because here's the thing no one talks about after a big confrontation. The real victory isn't the applause. It's the quiet consistency afterward. By mid-September, Lily had officially accepted the job. She forwarded me the offer letter, not for approval, just to share it. That alone told me how much had changed. But 3 days before she was set to move into my guest room, I got another email. This one from Harold, short, blunt, open quote. We need to talk before she leaves. In person. Just us. Close quote. I stared at the screen. Because if there was one pattern I hadn't fully tested yet, it was whether Harold could sit across from me without trying to rewrite the script. And I had a feeling this conversation wasn't about Lily at all. It was about control, and whether he was ready to admit he'd lost it. I didn't answer Harold's email right away. Just us. Those two words used to mean lecture, or pressure, or some version of, you're misunderstanding the situation. Now they felt like a test. I replied the next morning, open quote, we can meet Sunday afternoon, public place, 2 p.m., close quote. If he noticed the public place specification, he didn't comment on it. He just sent back, open quote, fine, close quote. We met at a quiet coffee shop halfway between our houses. Neutral ground, wooden tables, too bright lighting, the kind of place where college students pretend to study. He was already there when I walked in, sitting stiffly with a black coffee in front of him. He looked older than he had at Thanksgiving. Not fragile, just aware. I ordered tea and sat across from him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he cleared his throat. She told you about Denver? Yes. You support it? I do. He nodded slowly. It's far. That's the point. He gave a tight half smile at that. Silence again. Then he leaned forward slightly. You think I don't see it? See what? That things got out of hand. I didn't jump in. I let him finish. I didn't wake up one day planning to make you the villain, he said. It just happened. Every time you hesitated, it felt like judgment. It wasn't judgment, I said calmly. It was burnout. He looked at me, really looked at me. I grew up believing family means you step in without asking questions, he continued. My father did that. I did that. Grandpa also believed in accountability, I said gently. He nodded once. Yeah, he did. We sat with that. Then he said the thing I didn't expect. I was embarrassed. About what? Not being able to provide like I used to, watching you succeed while I was scrambling. His jaw tightened. It was easier to say you'd changed than admit I felt behind. That landed heavier than any accusation he'd thrown at me. I never thought I was better than you, I said quietly. I know that now, he admitted. There it was. Not dramatic, not shouted, just acknowledgement. He took a sip of his coffee, then added, the trust bothers me. Why? Because it formalizes something that used to feel natural. It also protects relationships, I said. Structure removes resentment. He nodded slowly. I can see that. Another pause, then he asked, if Lily thrives out there, what happens to us? It was the first time he'd framed it that way, not as control, not as hierarchy, as uncertainty. We figure out a new version, I said. one that isn't built around emergencies. He exhaled. And Thanksgiving, he asked. I'm still hosting. He studied my face. You won't ambush anyone. I didn't ambush anyone last year, I said evenly. I responded to public misrepresentation publicly. He gave a reluctant nod. Fair. Then I have one request, he said carefully. I waited. No more surprises. That goes both ways, I replied. He almost smiled. Fair. We sat there another 15 minutes, talking about small things. Weather, his truck, the fact that Lily had always hated snow and was about to live in it. When we stood to leave, he hesitated. I'm proud of you, he said awkwardly. The words felt unfamiliar coming from him without an audience. Thank you, I replied. It wasn't a full repair, but it was something honest. That week, Lily moved into my guest room with 2 suitcases and a nervous energy that filled the apartment. We cooked simple dinners, split grocery receipts down the middle, talked about Denver like it was a foreign country. The night before her flight, she sat at my kitchen table and said, You know what's weird? What? I don't feel like I'm escaping you anymore. I raised an eyebrow. I used to feel like I had to prove something, she clarified. Like if I wasn't struggling, you'd lose your role. I let that sit. I don't need a role, I said gently. I need a relationship. She nodded slowly. The next morning, I drove her to the airport. At the drop-off curb, she hugged me tight. Next Thanksgiving, she said, pulling back, I might bring snow with me. Just bring honesty, I replied. She laughed and disappeared into the terminal. I drove home alone, surprisingly steady. That evening, my phone buzzed. A family group chat notification, the original one, Pierce Pride. Harold had posted something. I opened it cautiously. It was a photo of Lily at the airport. Caption, open quote, proud of this one, starting fresh, and proud of Nolan too. Growth all around. Close quote, no sarcasm, no subtext, just public acknowledgement. And underneath it, for the first time in years, there wasn't a single comment about money, just clapping emojis, encouragement, normalcy. I set my phone down because this was the quiet third climax no one films. Not the explosion, not the confrontation, the recalibration. 3 months until Thanksgiving, my table, my terms. And for the first time, I wasn't hosting to prove I mattered. I was hosting because I did. But a week before invitations were set to go out, another envelope arrived. This one thicker, from Harold. And inside was a typed list titled Family Attendance Conditional. I unfolded it slowly because apparently, even growth comes with fine print. The envelope was heavier than it needed to be. That was the first thing I noticed. Harold has always believed presentation adds authority. When I unfolded the papers inside, I wasn't surprised to see bullet points, clean margins, a bold header, family attendance, conditional allow. I sat at my dining table, the same one that would seat 30 people in less than a month, and started reading. Open quote. In order to ensure a peaceful and productive Thanksgiving gathering, the following expectations are requested. 1. No discussion of last year's events unless mutually agreed upon. 2. No reference to private communications, past or present. 3. No financial announcements or structural updates during dinner. 4. A pre-dinner acknowledgement that family unity is prioritized over individual grievances. 5. Seating arrangements to be shared in advance. Close quote. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the page. Seating arrangements? I almost laughed. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't explosive. It was strategic. This wasn't about silencing truth anymore. It was about regaining predictability, about controlling variables. I picked up my phone and called him. He answered on the third ring. You got it, he said, not a question. I did. Silence stretched between us. You think I'm trying to control things again? He said flatly. I think you're trying to prevent discomfort, I replied. That's not unreasonable. No, I agreed. It's human. He let out a slow breath. Last year blindsided people. Last year corrected a narrative, I said calmly. There's a difference. Another pause. Read number 4 again, he said. I glanced down. A pre-dinner acknowledgement that family unity is prioritized over individual grievances. You have an issue with that? He asked. Yes. Why? Because unity built on silence isn't unity, it's suppression. He didn't respond immediately. I'm not planning a tribunal, I continued. I'm planning a meal, but I won't agree to language that implies truth is a grievance. That landed. He shifted tactics. What about the financial announcements line? There won't be any, I said, unless someone brings them up. And the seating chart? That's just logistics. A small, reluctant chuckle slipped out of him. You always were particular about logistics. I work in admissions, I reminded him. If I can coordinate 500 campus visitors in a day, I can seat Aunt Denise away from Uncle Ray. That got a real laugh. The tension softened slightly. So what are you proposing? He asked. I looked around my dining room, the empty chairs stacked along the wall, the sideboard where I'd already started placing serving dishes. I'll send out invitations with a simple statement, I said. Something like, this table values honesty, respect, and forward movement. And no reading of messages? He pressed. If no one rewrites history, I said evenly, there will be nothing to read. He was quiet for a long moment. You're different, he said finally. I'm consistent, I corrected. Another pause. Then he surprised me. Send the invitations, he said. We'll come. No negotiation. No extra caveats. Just that. After we hung up, I sat there for a while because this wasn't a battle anymore. It was a recalibration. I opened my laptop and drafted the invitation email. Subject, Thanksgiving at Nolan's. November 24th, open quote. I'm hosting Thanksgiving this year. The table will be open to anyone who can agree to 3 things. Respect for boundaries, no side narratives, honesty without ambush. This isn't about revisiting last year. It's about building something healthier going forward. RSVP by November 1st. Nolan, close quote. I read it twice. Clear, calm, not defensive. I hit send. Over the next week, responses trickled in. Aunt Marlene, wouldn't miss it. Uncle Ray, I'll behave, probably. Aunt Denise, thank you for hosting. Truly, Harold replied last. Open quote. We'll be there. No conditions. Close quote. I stared at those 2 words for a long time. No conditions. Growth doesn't always look like grand gestures. Sometimes it looks like someone deleting a bullet point. Lily called that night from Denver. So, she said, I heard you laid down the law. I sent an email, I corrected. She laughed. Dad showed me. He didn't argue with it. That's new. Yeah, she agreed softly. There was a different steadiness in her voice these days. She'd been at her job 6 weeks, paid her own rent on time, sent me a photo of her first Colorado snow like it was a trophy. You nervous? She asked. A little? About what? That patterns don't disappear. They just wait. She was quiet for a second. Then we don't feed them, she said simply. I smiled. The night before Thanksgiving, I set the table alone, 30 chairs, place cards handwritten in ink. No hierarchy, no head of the table, just a long rectangle where everyone faced each other equally. I stood back and looked at it. Last year, truth exploded at someone else's house. This year, truth didn't need to explode. It just needed space. My phone buzzed one more time before bed. A text from Harold, an email, a text. I considered ignoring it, then I opened it. Open quote, I'm bringing the turkey, not as a condition, as a contribution. Close quote, I read it twice. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like a power move. It felt like participation. Tomorrow, 30 people would walk through my door. The past would be in the room, but so would something new. And whether this was a permanent shift or just a temporary truce, I didn't know yet. All I knew was this. I wasn't the ATM anymore. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't holding receipts in secret. I was holding the door open. And next year, well, we'd see what conditions came with that invitation.